Donald Trump has imposed new tariffs on imports from Mexico and Canada and has doubled the tariffs already put in place on Chinese goods. Canada and China have retaliated with tariffs of their own against U.S. goods, sparking fears of a global trade war and higher prices. But what exactly are tariffs and how will they affect everyday consumers? We're going to talk about it. Let's get into it. Tariffs are taxes charged on goods imported from other countries. The companies that bring the foreign goods into the country pay the tax to the government. Typically, tariffs are a percentage of a product's value. So, imposing a 20% tariff on Chinese goods means that a product worth $10 would have an additional $2 charge applied to it. Now, these companies can choose to either eat that cost or pass some or all of it onto their customers. The US has typically charged lower tariffs on goods than other countries, which means his plan could lead to a sudden and sharp increase in tax rates and the prices people pay at checkout. Why is Trump using tariffs? Tariffs are a central part of Trump's economic plan. He says that they will boost U.S. manufacturing and protect jobs, as well as raising tax revenue and growing the economy. Goods from China, Mexico, and Canada accounted for more than 40% of imports into the U.S. When he first announced these plans, the president said that he was taking bold action to hold these countries accountable to their promises of halting illegal immigration and stopping, drugs from entering our country. Now, the administration is saying that they haven't upheld their part of the deal, and therefore, Trump is imposing these tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. A 10% charge on all goods imported from China started on February 4th. And Trump later said shipments worth less than $800 would be exempt. Then on February 10th, China responded with its own tariffs, including a 10 to 15% tax on some U.S. agricultural goods. Beijing has also started targeting various U.S. aviation, defense, and tech firms by adding them to an unreliable entity list and imposing export controls. The 10% levy doubled to 20% on March 4th. Trump has introduced 25% tariffs on goods from both Canada and Mexico. And these just started on March the 4th. Meanwhile, Canadian energy imports face a 10% tariff. Trump had previously said the month long delay would let the U.S. see whether or not a final economic deal with Canada could be reached. So he has delayed the tariffs against Canada and Mexico for a month to see if they can come to some type of agreement. Canada may also restrict U.S. access to its energy. It is the top oil supplier to the U.S. and also provides some electricity to 30% of the state. Now, in Mexico, Mexico also delayed retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods after this initial pause. President Claudia Sheinbaum agreed to send 10,000 members of the National Guard to the U.S. Mexican border to prevent the trafficking of drugs, in particular fentanyl. She said the U.S. had in turn to agree to increase measures to prevent the trafficking of high power American weapons into Mexico. Now, the month long tariff exemption is for cars made in North America that comply with the contingent's existing free trade agreement. And this was negotiated by Trump and sets out rules for how much of a car must be made in each country to qualify for duty free treatment. The Canadian and Mexican tariffs prompted fears of significant impacts on car manufacturing because a lot of the component parts are typically imported from Mexico and Canada. This could cause the average US car price to increase by $3,000 because of the import taxes. There's also a steel and aluminum tariff that is coming. Trump said the 25% tariff on both metals will come into effect on March 12th with no exceptions. The U.S. is the world's largest importer of steel, with Canada, Brazil, and Mexico its top three suppliers. Canada also provided more than 50% of the aluminum imported into the U.S. in 2024. American companies that use steel and aluminum to make products have warned the tariffs could push their prices up. Despite the exemptions, tariffs raised the average price of steel and aluminum in the U.S. by 2.4% and 1.6%, respectively. Now, which products will be affected and will prices increase? So, all goods from China worth more than $800 are covered by the tariff. All steel imports from around the world face a 25% tax. Mexican and Canadian goods will also be subject to a 25% levy. A 10% tariff has been added to Canadian energy exports. Goods from Mexico that could be affected include fruit, vegetables, alcohol, spirits, and beer. In addition to steel, Canadian goods such as timber, grains, and potatoes are also likely to get more expensive. And then, of course, the avocados that we get from Mexico. An increase in the cost of Canadian oil and electricity could push up prices across the board. U.S. tariffs on imported washing machines increased the price of laundry equipment by 34%. Prices fell once the tariffs expired. It is estimated that the Mexico and Canada tariffs, combined with adding another 10% tariff on Chinese goods, could raise prices on everyday purchases by 0.81% to 1.63%. Capital Economics said the annual rate of U.S. inflation could increase from 2.9% to as high as 4%. So, what effect will this have on the everyday consumer? If these companies do not eat the costs or find ways to cut costs, then more likely they will pass those costs on to consumers, raising their prices, making inflation higher, and making it harder for us, everyday consumers, to afford everyday goods such as food, such as parts for our cars, getting our cars, going to a mechanic, getting our cars fixed. Trump trying to spark a trade war, or is this a tactic in order to get the U.S. to produce more than it is importing? Because I can see where this is coming from. It is part of his agenda of keeping jobs in America, being self sufficient, not heavily relying on other countries for necessary, um, goods, food, materials, and therefore. So I could definitely see um, why this can be a tactic in order to get companies to produce more in the United States. But is this the right way? And is the effect of these tariffs going to be detrimental to American taxpayers? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure that you like this video and you subscribe to the channel. And I will talk to you in the next one. Make sure that you watch this one.